So now moving on to the topic of infidelity. Of course, we know that there are two components to it. There's the person who has been unfaithful, and then there's the person who has been cheated on. So if we start with the person who's actually been unfaithful, what can they actually do to try and reestablish trust in that relationship again? Because once you've been through something as traumatic as that, once you've been the person who's inflicted that on someone else, trust is not going to come easy, and there's going to be so many flashbacks and triggers. So how can you, first of all, is it possible? And second of all, if possible, how do you reestablish trust in that relationship?
So like you said, infidelity is something that, attacks the very existence of the relationship, the base of relationship, that is trust. But yes, it is possible to re-establish that trust. It's definitely possible, but it requires a lot of work, because any relationship requires a lot of work, especially when it comes to infidelity. There is persistent efforts required on both the partners' part, right? So it's possible, but re-establishing trust will take time. So the first thing that the person needs to understand is that they have to be really, really very patient. Okay, it is not going to happen, overnight, that the other person or the partner is going to understand it, go through it, forgive. And the whole concept of forgiveness is very difficult in this particular situations. While it would be easy to forgive a person for something very trivial, or something which is like, okay, I did not come on time, so I forgive you, it's fine. Okay, yeah. But something as severe as this, which attacks the whole concept of relationship, it takes a lot of time. So patience is key. That is the first thing. Now, like you asked, so we start with the person who has been unfaithful. So what they can do at their end depends, or the success of that depends entirely on what their partner is like. That's very important, number one. Number two, what is most important is what has their relationship been like. So before let's say I became unfaithful to my partner, before I became unfaithful, how was my relationship with my partner? We cannot always say that infidelity happens in cases where, there are always fights, and there is, there is no, let's say, what do we say? We are not on the same page, and so on and so forth. Infidelity can happen with anyone. Okay. Even the best of relationships where two best friends married each other, there also can be infidelity. So we need to understand this first, that it's not always that infidelity hai to they must be having fight, and it was always, now they're going to be separated, the divorce is now, is the next step, and so on and so forth. It's not like that. Infidelity can happen with lots of reasons, right? So without getting into the reasons why it happens, because that's a separate issue altogether, but what the person himself, what he can do is, first, like I said, be patient about it. They can do is, in that case, that they can be very patient, know what your relationship has been like, whether it was something which was built on a strong communication. If it was not, then it's going to be a little tough, because communication is key in this case. The first important thing is to be very, very honest and very genuine while saying or accepting that yes, there was a mistake. Now, irrespective of whether the partner finds out that he or she was unfaithful, or whether they themselves, out of this guilt or remorse, that they say that, I have cheated on you and I'm really sorry about it. Okay, whatever, whichever way it comes into the fore, the apology or the seeking for forgiveness has to be absolutely genuine. There cannot be any faking in that. If there is any faking in that, then we are starting on the wrong foot, right? So that's why the remorse has to be genuine. Then what they can do is immediately, immediately when this has been disclosed, or it has been found that the partner has been unfaithful, it's necessary that they apologize. It's necessary that they take complete responsibility of it, instead of saying that, it happened because of this, because you were not paying attention. It's going to make matters worse, and it's not needed, because whatever the reason is, if I have been unfaithful, I must take the responsibility of that. So having the ownership that yes, I made this mistake and I'm really truly sorry for it, right? Then it's also very important, like I said, communication. So while saying all of this, many times what happens is when people become unfaithful, and when they are coming out and they are saying that I'm really sorry about this, in that flow of apologizing, they forget that the partner also must be wanting to say something.
Mhm.
So listening is a very, very important thing. So whatever the person is saying, let it be. It could be full of abuses, it could be full of curses, it could be no words at all, it could be just tantrums, it could be just the silent treatment, it could be anything. But it's necessary that with a lot of patience, the person who has been unfaithful listens to the partner. It's necessary, because if in this moment they realize that even in this moment I'm not being heard,
Mm.
then again the relationship or the trust issue is always going to be there,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Then of course it's very important to not undermine what the partner is feeling. Like for example, if the partner says that I feel really cheated, fine. I feel very angry, I feel cheap. If a partner says that I feel cheap that you had to go with someone else for a physical relationship, if there was a physical relationship, and then I feel very cheap, then what were you doing with me all these years? So
Mhm.
instead of saying that this is stupid, how can you say something like that?
Mhm.
Okay. So acknowledging each and every feeling, because it's like a trauma, and it's like a sudden traumatic event which has happened. So any feeling is not something which should not happen.
Right.
Okay. Basically emotions and feelings are not something that should not happen, they just happen, they are there, right?
Mm.
So acknowledging that, okay, my partner is feeling cheated, my partner is feeling cheap, my partner is feeling that she's not up to the mark, or he's not up to the mark, it's all right, it's okay. So
Mhm.
acknowledging whatever the partner is feeling, because that also helps a lot of it helps in building trust. Then it's important to also give them time to deal with the thing. So being patient, not rushing into things, so asking an apology is probably, it takes 5 minutes or 15 minutes or at max 1 hour. But
Yeah.
giving forgiveness or forgiving somebody, it can take a lifetime. You never know.
Yeah.
So if you rush into it, then probably the person would say that, well, you didn't think about getting into another relationship, and now you cannot wait to even get back to my relationship, right? So what is wrong with you,
Mhm.
right? So there is a lot that is to be processed, because whenever there is an issue of infidelity, there's a lot of question, not just on the person's trust. Like if let's say my partner cheated on me, then it's not that whether I have issues trusting him, I will also have issues trusting myself. There would
Mm.
be a lot of questioning on myself, that
Yeah.
I was not able to keep this relationship alive,
Yeah.
and that's why he
It's because
he
of
dwindled,
you.
and it's because of me. So there would be a lot of self blame also. So
Mm.
the person needs to give time, that okay, fine, these are the feelings that you're going through, take time. Okay. It's very, very, very important that the affair that happened, or the relationship that happened out of this primary relationship, ends. Because here if we are saying that I'm sorry, I apologize, and there it is being continued, it makes no sense,
Mm.
right? So that has to stop. That has to like immediately stop. And then slowly getting involved into everyday activities, slowly showing, not by necessarily saying things, but actually taking interest in maybe the house, or maybe in the relationship, maybe in the person, maybe in the family, whatever the dynamics are. So slowly, gradually finding your way back into the relationship. See, it's okay to lose your way in the relationship, because that may happen. And many times I've also seen that when people move from one relationship to another, it's not that they want to or they're not satisfied in this relationship. Okay.
Mhm.
It's because probably there is the strong urge. We are human beings, we are always intrigued, and we are always curious about finding out, okay, so what will happen then, right?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
there's a strong urge to explore your own physicality, and out of that came this next relationship. So it was not intentional, but it happens,
Mhm.
right? And that's why it's necessary that I find my way back into the relationship. You may have lost it, but try that, and ultimately, if it would be really, really good if help is sought, support is sought. Support in the sense from selective people, not talking about something like this which is very, very sensitive to anyone and everyone. choosing the right people with whom it has to be talked, maybe a close friend, maybe someone in the family, or maybe just keeping it within the partners. That is the best way. If there is a need that communication is a problem, like I said, if the relationship has a strong premise of a good communication, then maybe an external help is not required, because both of them know each other too well. But if, let's say, communication itself has been a problem, then it's always better to seek external help. It could be of a family counselor, it could be of a couples therapist, it could be of somebody whom they trust in. That is also possible. But this has to be done very carefully, because it's a very sensitive issue. If they follow this, and primarily if they remain patient, I think things can work out. They do have a way of working out.
So I guess it's about sort of being patient and having faith and doing the actual groundwork. So it's nice to know that there is definitely hope and healing can happen.
There is.
Yeah. It takes,
but from the the partner's point of view, who has been into this or who has experienced unfaithful behavior from her or his partner, they also need to understand a few things. It's necessary for them also, because then it's always like, who has the one who has been unfaithful, he does all the work. Now that he has cheated on me, he has to find his way back. Right. So he needs to put in more efforts. Why should I do anything? I'm not going to do anything. I was not at fault. Right. So if this relationship has to work, if this trust has to be rebuilt, it has to be from both ways.
Right. Okay.
But more efforts definitely has to be put from the past, from the person who has been unfaithful. But as a person who has had a unfaithful partner, they also, at their own level, they can do certain things, like acknowledging their own emotions, identifying that I'm going through all of this, and telling yourself that this is not something which is wrong that I'm feeling. It's absolutely justified, and it's okay to feel all of this. Whatever the emotions are, it's okay to feel all of this. It's necessary to not ignore things, that, okay, ignore it. Hota rehta hai. People do this. Let me just, move on. Moving on is not an option here.
Right.
Because you cannot develop trust or build trust if you move on.
Yeah.
Okay. If you move on, you leave that relationship and you move on.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Right.
So it's not that, I'll keep this. It's something that is troubling me. I'm going to lock it up in a cupboard. I'll put it aside and then I'll forget about it. But you don't forget about it, because you know that you have locked it up, and it you know exactly where it is kept. How can you forget about it?
Yeah.
Right. So
you're just suppressing it rather than
exactly
the cupboard out. Almost.
Absolutely. So instead of ignoring it, that it didn't happen, or let it be, forget it, no, acknowledge that this has happened. But what happens after that could be a choice. So what happened before was not my choice, because I was not involved. But now what happens to my relationship is a choice. Okay. It's necessary to also it's difficult. This is a very difficult part, but it is necessary to stay away from blaming, but talking about accountability. Because if in a relationship, trust has to be built, and even if I have to talk to my unfaithful partner, instead of putting the blame game or playing that blame game, that you did this and you did that, the other person knows that he was at fault. So there would be a blame game, but then it's not helping my relationship in any way. But if I support it with accountability, like, how much responsible are you in this relationship? What role have you played in this? How accountable are you for the success of this relationship? If I am behaving like this, if I'm feeling cheated, or if you did this for me, with me, then how accountable are you for the success or failure of this relationship? So talking about accountability instead of blame, that also is necessary. It is going to be very difficult for the person to forgive. That is the most difficult part. Forgiving is very similar to going through a grief period. So when there is a loss of loved one, grief period is it's a 5-stage process. So it takes time for any person to go through that grief period. Similarly, forgiving also doesn't happen overnight, and but it does happen. It takes a lot of efforts, and again, it takes a lot of time also. So it could be maybe 6 months, it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, depends. It depends a lot on how much I am willing to forget and how willing to forgive, and how much my unfaithful partner is willing to come back.
Right.
It all depends on this combination. And ultimately, if again, I repeat, if communication has been a problem, it's always better to seek external help, because they start, they lead the conversation. So you don't have to actually start it and then end up in a fight, or end up with more confusion and more a huge roller coaster of emotions. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the few things which can be done
Yeah.
in infidelity.
Yeah. So the question I wanted to ask was, okay, so in terms of the person who has been cheated on, like you said, they shouldn't play the blame game. At the same time, they should sort of uh, focus on like the accountability aspect of things. But I don't know if, the question I want to ask is it possible for them to try and make the situation more comfortable for the other person? So if we sort of go back to in the initial period where someone has to confide in the other of the infidelity that has taken place, what can that person do to help their partner feel comfortable enough to share? Or is it too much to expect from that individual that first of all, you're already the person who's going through that heartache, and then to expect them to try and cater to the other person? Are we asking for too much, or is it actually more useful to try and do that?
Let's say generally speaking, or if you look at it from the like macro level, then probably it's asking too much. But what can work actually, if the person becomes mature enough and make the other person comfortable. There is nothing like it if the partner who has been cheated upon, make the other person comfortable and says that, I know that you did this, I'm aware, and I don't know if I can forgive you or not. I really don't know. But it would be better if we talk it out. Because instead of, me sulking or not talking, or instead of, we just arguing over things, why don't you tell me what happened? And then the other person has to answer all questions. It's absolutely necessary that the other person becomes absolutely honest and, actually tells that, this is how it happened and this is what happens if the partner starts that. So if, for example, if I have been cheated upon, it would be really ideal. I would say it would be really ideal that I make the other person comfortable, because, and in this situation, then I have to decide what is more important. Is my ego, or me being right, or me being righteous in the relationship is more important, or the relationship is important? That has to be decided. And I'm sure that if the person gives more importance to the relationship and not to self in the relationship, they would try to create a comfortable environment, so that, okay, whatever said and done, at least let's try to sort it out. Right? So it is possible. It may appear that we are asking for a lot from the person who is going through all of that. But trust me, if that happens, then it saves a lot of heartache. It would save a lot of heartache. So it's really something that the person should be doing. Whether they can do or not, or whether it is possible for them or not, entirely depend on their own psychological makeup.
But in the long run, it's more useful to try.
It's absolutely useful. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that makes sense. And so just to sort of wrap things up, I'd like to ask one final question, which is, what are sort of some telltale signs or some trademarks that we can look out for that differentiate a healthy relationship from a toxic one? Because oftentimes when you are in a relationship, that's kind of all you know, even if it's not your first relationship. It's harder to tell that you're in quicksand when you're actually in that quicksand. So what would be the signs that we should look out for?
So for either of the relationship, whether it is toxic or whether it is healthy, I personally believe, and this is from my own personal experience and the people that I've seen around me, and from the clients that I have had, there are a few things that I need to be clear about in my relationship that I'm not going to compromise on. Okay, so these are the things that are very important to me, and I need to explain it to my partner. while in any relationship compromises happen, and of course we need to do that, because two people coming from two entirely different backgrounds with two entirely different set of ideas trying to make it work, it the love part and everything,
Mm.
it is left aside when it comes to actually staying with the person, no matter how much you love them, right? Because when it comes to coexistence, there is supposed to be a compromise. And I'm not saying this in a negative sense at all. It is always for the betterment of both of them, because I learn from him, he learns something from me. That's how we coexist. It's not a competition that who compromises more. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
So not being into a competition, first of all,
Right.
that's the sign. Unhealthy sign would be constantly comparing. Unhealthy sign. Healthy sign, there is competition. Like, for example, today I cook this, and so I try to, compete and say that, see, I'm going to cook this better than you. Healthy competition, right? So while we compete, we don't forget to compliment.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've cooked something nice, my husband compliments me. But
Mm-hmm.
if he tries to show that, see, I'm going to tell you now that, how I am a better cook, then when he cooks, I give back that compliment. So I don't say that I'm not going to compliment you, right?
Mm.
It's not like that. So this is healthy sign. Then another thing is that self-respect, according to me, should be rather the most important thing in any relationship. Self-respect for both partners. If your partner cannot respect you, doesn't matter how much he loves you. This is what I personally feel,
Right.
because love is something which is very chemical, which is very physical in nature, right? I'm not talking about the love that we share with our mom, or the platonic, love that we share, whatever that means. I don't know what that means, right? It's a very weird term.
Mm-hmm.
But but when we talk about love relationships,
Yeah.
love is something which is very which can be seen, which can be measured, that okay, so there are signs of or ways in which I can show my love. But
Yeah.
self respect is not something that can be always seen. It is uh, always seen in many many small little things,
Mm.
right? Like, for example, when you're sitting amongst your family, and if you're or with your friends, and your partner deliberately tries to pull you down,
Mm.
I don't know whether he or she is really respecting you. If it happens once in a while with a close group of friends where everyone is,
Yeah.
pulling each other's leg, that's okay. But if it happens randomly, if it happens out of the blue, if it happens, when at times when it was not really required, you need to really see whether you're being respected, because love
Mm.
is something different. But I don't understand, if a person doesn't respect the other person, how can they stay together? So respect is a very, very important thing. And that has to be clarified in the beginning itself, that I would not take my respect for granted. Okay. Trust, of course, is a very important issue. When we expect trust, we also need to know that we need to be trustworthy also. So while I expect that my partner is trustworthy and he shares things with me or
Mm-hmm.
stays with me, I also need to create that environment where he finds that trust, or whether he finds that comfort that, okay, I can be trustful with her, right? It's
Yeah.
not that I keep on expecting, but I don't create that premise of showing the trust, right? Or show, not just trust, like anything else, right?
Mm.
So similarly for respect, if I am expecting respect, I need to respect my partner.
Yeah.
If I am expecting love, I need to show love and care for my partner. So it has to be mutual, it has to be discussed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Healthy, unhealthy, again depends on these few things. But I always say that in any relationship, you must have your own list of non-negotiables. You must have a list of the things which you will not negotiate upon at all. For example, I may negotiate upon, let's say, my husband likes to have tea or coffee in a certain way. I don't like to have coffee that way, but I would negotiate and I would say, okay, fine, I'll have it your way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's negotiable. It's okay.
Yeah.
But if that is something which I cannot get by, then that becomes a part of my non-negotiable. And I tell him that I'm going to make a different coffee for you. I'm going to make a different coffee for me.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
I am not saying that you drink the way I want,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I'm keeping it separate. So non-negotiable could be tiny little things like these, or big things like, you are not supposed to call me when I'm at work. End of story. And
Right.
if I'm at work and if you call me and if I snap at you, understand that I will snap at you.
Yeah. Because you've
Okay.
told them beforehand. Yeah.
Because you have told them before. And when this is told, if it is informed, And then when that happens, they know that, okay, this is non-negotiable and she's not going to take that nonsense from me.
Yeah.
Same thing, the other partner also needs to have some non-negotiable. So if these are the things which are clarified, if there is a list ready, it doesn't have to be pasted somewhere, but you need to discuss this. If it is there, anything that happens out of that is something which is a part of relationship, which is compromise and adjusting. And that's fine, in that process we grow. So I don't really see it negatively or in the bad light that, oh my God, I'm compromising.
Yeah.
Well, how else are you going to live with anyone?
Of course. Yeah. No, that's true. And having that list to start with, saves you so much heartache in the long run. And I suppose
Absolutely.
that list goes back to, having that self-respect, because
Yeah.
these are things that you want, and, you
Yeah.
respect yourself enough to know that this is important to me.
Exactly.
So you can respect the other person's list as well, because it's not like
Absolutely.
you're compromising on the basic things that matter to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like that idea, and I guess that applies to, you can apply it to every relationship.
Every relationship, the thing is that, with our friends, we don't usually apply this because friends are friends, and when they pull our leg or when they say something nasty, it's just, friendship, so it's fine. There can be toxic friends also, of course, but in personal relationships, it's slightly different because the expectations and demands are very different there. With friends, even if my friend doesn't really call me for 10 days or a month or few months, I'm like, okay, fine, because that concept is different. But if my husband or if my partner doesn't call me for a week, I'm like, how can you do that, right? So so demands are a little bit different, expectations are different in both relationships, but yeah, non-negotiables work in almost all types of relationships.
Yes. So that was really the last of the questions that I wanted to ask you. And yeah, I guess thank you for such an enriching conversation. I've personally learned so much. So I'm sure that when we share this, there are going to be so many individuals out there who will benefit. So thank you for your time. Honestly, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I had a great time interacting with you.
Yes, the feeling is mutual for sure. And, I hope that we'll get to have more such conversations in the future.
Sure.
I'll come to you, harass you with more topics soon.
Absolutely, no problem. I look forward to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.